you have to get used to rejection across the board, right? Like your first 100 sales calls, maybe somebody will take a meeting with you, but like you're gonna get rejected a lot. Partnerships, you might want to do some partnerships. These guys are gonna say you're too small, why would I partner with you, right? Like, so I think you just have to build like a very healthy level of resilience. I think resilience is like incredibly important. Keeping your humor through it, I think, is important.
True.
And then just being like a resilient problem solver is how I describe it. That's what you need to be. You have to just be a resilient problem solver.
Resilient problem solver. That's going to be a thumbnail. Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Exponential Show. Today it's a pleasure of mine to introduce Kush Sodhia, the CEO and co-founder of Papaya. Kush, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me.
It's the pleasure is all mine, Kush. So let's get straight to it, right? So this is a question we ask all our guests: is what's your superhero origin story? That what were the motivations and events and mistakes that led you to the crazy world of becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a good question. I had a pretty conventional path, I would say, career path. So I studied finance in my undergrad in Boston. This was 2007, 2011. It was like a very popular time to study finance and try to be a banker back then. I then went and worked in London. So I worked for JP Morgan there for 4 years. Then most people, you go banking. If you want to move to consulting, you go to business school in between. It was also something that I'd been very excited about. So went to do business school in Chicago and then moved into consulting with BCG, well, Bain and then BCG. So pretty conventional, nothing very superhero-y about, I suppose, that path. But I think there was about 3 years into consulting, I kind of felt like I didn't have a lot of purpose in the work that I was doing. I'd worked in client service and banking, I'd worked in client services and consulting, and I'd kind of felt a little bit like I was still seeking some sort of purpose. And so I wanted to go operational and I wanted to see what I could do on that side. But I think what it is that everything that I'd done before had actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise for what the things that you need to have when you become an entrepreneur. And so I think maybe there's some of the superhero qualities probably came from those very tough jobs, but it all kind of has worked out pretty well so far.
Great to hear. And now coming to your current project, which is Papaya. So I have a kind of an anecdote where I visited Sarni's not too long ago, and I was just with friends, and at the time I did not put two and two together, understanding this is a Papaya product, but I scanned QR code, ordered my stuff, and I was thinking to myself, hey, this is convenient. The whole point of not having to split the bill between 5 different families, it was just I registered in my brain that this was a convenient thing. And then several months later I realized that you were the one behind that. So I saw there was one specific problem that you were solving, but I'm sure that was not the only one. So can you just shed some light upon the problems that you're solving for restaurants and for restaurant customers like myself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll start on the restaurant side. I think, we really wanted to work with restaurants post-COVID to help them with, we'll call it margin improvement in their business, right? So you go through this 2-year phase of COVID, incredibly difficult for hospitality businesses. I have friends that work in F&B here, and it was a very tough time. So we wanted to try and solve kind of 2 problems for them. One was a staffing problem. We increasingly heard that staff here was getting harder to find post-COVID, harder to retain, and harder to train, right? So you were having like high levels of attrition, you had to constantly train them. And the second was, obviously, they're always looking for ways to improve their sales, right? And so we started ideating a little bit on what can you do digitally that will help you with reducing staff requirements, then also increasing sales for restaurants. And from that came our mobile ordering and payment solution, what you used. I'm assuming it was probably at Bartels.
Bartels, did I say Sarnia?
Yeah, I think probably
my
Bartels,
apologies. Yeah, it was Bartels.
And so, it's a product that we've seen in other markets, right? I was in the US, one of the biggest players there, Toast, is now a multi-billion-dollar company. They started as a mobile ordering and payments product, and they built from there into this massive platform. And it's a very simple solution to these two problems, right? So you allow customers to order on their own, you allow customers to pay on their own, you reduce the staff burden. And we increasingly say to our restaurants that you don't need to force customers to do it. You'll know just as many people who get very angry at QRs, right? There's a little bit of an anti-QR ordering sentiment.
That is true.
Don't worry, I know about it. And restaurants also say that to us. They're like, oh no, our customers don't like it. So give them the option, right? Your staff should still take orders if customers want to. But the people who don't want to talk to the staff or don't feel the need to order the staff, at least they have the option, right? And then your staff can focus on the people who really want that.
Right.
So, and then your sales naturally increase. I'm sure if you're using a QR thing, you're always ordering more. We just did an analysis for one of our biggest customers. 10% revenue growth and 15% revenue growth in their 2 outlets.
Oh, wow. Okay.
From orders that include mobile ordering versus orders that don't include mobile ordering. So a pretty significant
that's
jump,
a meaningful
right?
difference.
And we're looking at this over 10,000 orders over the past year. So taking out all the kind of small sample size bias or anything like that. Basket size increasing between 20 to 50%. So pretty significant, and pretty clear data there. Then on the other side, we started, and so as we started to build this, we also then realized that restaurants are so far behind in this idea of using data to improve your business. So we're like, how do we help restaurants operate more efficiently? And we can do that with an ordering payments product. But how do we help them operate smarter as well, right? And like an e-commerce platform, their goal is to help their shops sell as much as they can because they benefit from it as well.
Of course.
In a very similar way, we are fully aligned with our restaurants in terms of our business model, whereby as they do better, we do better, and we are incentivized to help them grow as fast and as quickly as possible.
Got it.
And so we do that with kind of the data insights that we provide them. We can get into more details on that. And then on the customer side, I think the customer side it's about efficiency. If you want to order, pay, get out quickly, you can do it. We also have a rewards program that spans our ecosystem. So you could earn points at one outlet, and you can use them somewhere else, and same vice versa. So we look at a rewards program that's not just about going back to the same place, but it's about how do you bring new customers to a restaurant that they may not have been to before. And so I think those are kind of the two, many ways that we're trying to help both the restaurants and the customers.
That's interesting. And it's very valuable, the point that you mentioned about aligning with your customers and aligning your success with your customers, because that is something that a lot of startups, especially on the SaaS side, miss. And that I feel that this is, I know in the grander scheme of things, perhaps an afterthought for a lot of people, but it kind of puts things in perspective in terms of just structuring your business so that it makes sense for the people who are buying it as well. Yeah,
there's a very in the POS space and the space that we're in, the most common business model you'll find is trying to get restaurants to buy as much as they can up front, and very little on an ongoing basis, right? So they'll say, buy the printers for me, buy the tablets for me, spend 50,000 baht up front, 100,000 baht up front, pay me a SaaS fee of 2,000 baht a month from then on. And that's kind of it. But then you see how that incentive is misaligned, right? My incentive is to sell you whatever you, say whatever you want to close the sale at the beginning.
Correct.
But on an ongoing basis, I'm not really that incentivized to help your business get better, help your business survive necessarily, because your SaaS fee, your fixed SaaS fee per month is pretty small, right? We've turned it around a little bit. We built a POS that is entirely built in web. So we don't need our restaurants to buy anything from us, right? If they have devices, if they have a phone, if they have a laptop, any device can become a POS.
True.
And we ended up charging a SaaS fee, and I'll tell you a little bit about why we do that. But our main, goal is like we make money also on payments, right?
Right.
So we help them onboard with different payment gateways, and we help the payment gateways find all these new merchants,
Right.
and for that we take a small cut in between.
Right.
Now that means that we make money on usage. That means we're incentivized by usage.
Got it.
So that means that we also want to make sure that the restaurants are getting what they need, that customers are getting what they need, and that as a restaurant's revenue grows, that helps us and that helps them. And aligning those two, I think, is super important, because then that also impacts the way we look at our customer service. It looks at the types of restaurants that we go after. And so that's been kind of a very important part of our business model. That is to be honest, I don't know anyone else in Thailand that's doing that, in our space at least.
Interesting. And it makes a lot of sense, and it sounds obvious when you say these things, but it's very easy to miss these strategic decisions as you are in the thick of things, right? Now, I'm kind of switching gears here a little bit, but I want to talk about a couple of shifts you made, right? So you mentioned your background in banking, moving to consultancy, and spending time in the UK, spending time in the US, which for an Asian kid is like the holy grail. Asian kid in our generation is like the holy grail, right?
True,
So what made you make the switch, A, from the West back to here in Thailand? And B, what made you make the switch from your corporate journey into a restaurant SaaS of all things? So if you could just...
No, I think you're right. I think growing up in the 90s and 2000s here, there was this idea that you go West to make it, right? And I think when I was in college, that was still true. And I moved to London. I really loved living in London. It was an amazing time to be there. The States as well. But every year I would come back to Southeast Asia, right? Every year I would spend 3, 5, 6 weeks depending on the time I had, and you start to see the opportunity grow, right? So I think when we were younger, there was mostly here was the small office of a big corporate.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
But then I would come back and you'd start to see the startup scene grow a little bit. You start to see the economies in this part of the world grow. You started to notice that even for a consulting firm, their year-on-year growth in the US was kind of pretty nominal in terms of new business, because almost every company had a consulting firm working for them already. So they would just try to sell more to the same customers.
Right.
But in Asia, we started to see, or in Southeast Asia, you started to see these family conglomerates that had become so big that they were starting to become public companies, right? And now they were starting to bring in consultants to really create massive shifts in their business. If you look at the top line growth of a consulting firm, you might find that, almost 80% of their growth will come from, maybe parts of Asia, maybe parts of Africa. That's kind of the growth areas. And so I think that opportunity in this part of the world started to grow a lot bigger, became a lot more exciting. I don't want to make it seem like I made a very conscious decision to come back. So I left the US because I was working at Bain at the time. I went into the H-1B lottery. I didn't get the lottery.
Fair.
So it was a 50-50. When I was in there, I didn't get lucky. And that kind of forced my way back.
Right.
My goal was always to move back here. It just probably made it a bit quicker.
Right.
And that took some adjusting too, but ultimately, once I started working with BCG here and started to see everything that was going on in a lot more detail, I was very happy to be back.
Right.
And then COVID hit, and then I was even happier to have been here and not far away from the friends and family here.
Absolutely.
So I think, life sometimes works in mysterious ways.
Trust me, I, from my own journey and from others, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I'll say on this is I think if I'd stayed in the States, I probably would have never started my own company.
Interesting.
I think there's a inertia of like just get promoted, keep working the same job, earn more than you did last year. Like there's this, at least with, the people that, I came out of business school with, there was this kind of competitive spirit in that way. But here there's a bigger, I feel, culture of like taking risks, right? A lot of my friends here have started their own businesses. When you live in places where cost of living is much cheaper, you can also like adjust your, income and stuff and still be all right, right? So I think, I always say to my friends in the States, I was like, I don't think I'd ever be an entrepreneur if I stayed there. But here there's an opportunity that I didn't quite feel I would have had in the US.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a mixture of serendipity and conscious decisions and just coming home essentially. It's just
and I think I think like it took me a while to adapt to the fact that something happened in my life that I wasn't in control of. Right? Like I don't think that I was so thrilled about it when I came back at the beginning, but then it's kind of like you have to tell yourself like just grow up. I mean like things don't always work the way people want it to. And like look for the good part of all of this, and I think once I got over that, it was everything's been great.
Good to know. And now the second part of my question about just moving, so you've talked about moving countries, but moving industries and moving into restaurants. So how did that happen?
Sorry, I didn't even answer your question. So when I was at BCG, I worked across a few different industries, and for the last kind of year and a half, me and one of my co-founders, we were both very much focused on like food retail, food supply chain companies. And so started to get a very good understanding of what was going on in like the restaurant space, or let's say hospitality space. Also a world that I've always been very interested in. Like I almost minored in hospitality when I was doing my undergrad.
Wow, okay.
I didn't end up doing it because I was told if you want to go into banking, you should do accounting. So I did finance and accounting instead. But it's always been a world I was very interested in. I have friends here who are in the space. So as I saw them go through their struggles with opening restaurants, growing restaurants and things like that, I started to become more interested in space. And then it was like me and one of my co-founders, we left BCG. We both had the same last day. Neither of us had a plan really. He was going to go to business school. I just needed to get out and take a break. But we said, let's keep in touch, let's ideate. And so that's when we started to see, like I went to the States for a month, he went to Norway for a while, and we saw these solutions there. We already had kind of an idea that we wanted to do something in terms of restaurant efficiency, restaurant tech, and then that crystallized it a bit more for us that like this is the product, but the business model needs to be adapted for Thailand, right?
Of course.
Some of these products were only doing payments; they weren't doing ordering.
I see.
We said that doesn't really work in a country that has prompt pay.
True.
If you just put a QR on the table and say you can pay, you can't really charge too much on that. You need to add a bit of value on that. So yeah, I think it was a little bit just knowing the space we wanted to be in, having some of that industry expertise, but then also kind of just being a little bit inspired by what we'd seen elsewhere, and then adapting it to what made sense here.
Nice. So it's again similar to your geography shift. There was also a bunch of different factors that kind of came into play together to sort of push you towards this industry, essentially. Yeah. It's hard. It's like it's not a single thing that you can pinpoint to. I'm sure like you'll say the same thing. There's always like a confluence of factors. Absolutely. But yeah, it's great to understand that side of the story as well, right? Because sometimes from the outside looking in, it looks like, hey, you had a eureka moment and just started this company, but that seldom is the case. You kind of stumble your way into something.
You keep stumbling. You keep stumbling. They say the pivots and the changes, it's part of the business.
Now, you mentioned when we were discussing Thailand, just the opportunity in Southeast Asia in general. So I understand from when we last spoke that there's already steps you are taking towards harnessing this opportunity, but could you just shed more light about what you see, not just within Thailand, but its neighbors, and if you have any plans for this part of the world, essentially?
Absolutely. Solutions like ours, they're needed in every country.
Right.
In some countries, you see competitors that are doing it well, and some that you see the opportunity is still there. And so we are exploring a few different markets. I think one thing that we're starting to see is that there are certain markets, I'd say Singapore is one of these, possibly Hong Kong as well, where the F&B market is shrinking. Increasingly, I think Singapore last year, 500, 600 restaurants closing a month. In Hong Kong, you're increasingly seeing a shift of customers. On the weekends, they're going to Shenzhen, right? You can take the bullet train, be there in 20 minutes. You can have a weekend in Shenzhen at half the cost of what you're going to do in Hong Kong. And so these are interesting shifts for us. And Singapore is mostly a pricing thing. It's just very expensive. And so people are reducing how often they're going to eat out. Maybe they used to go out 4 times a week. Now they go out twice a week.
Right.
But that is a pretty big knock-on impact to the market. And so in these markets, it doesn't mean that the opportunity isn't there. It just means that you're fighting over a shrinking pie. Right? And then you start to look at who's already doing something similar or who's competing in that market, and it doesn't make sense. So I think that's how we look at kind of markets like that. And then there's a few others, I'd say Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, they fall into the bucket more. Yeah, these are growing markets.
Right.
With tech that is not necessarily as far along as it might be in a Singapore, for example. Right. So right now we're exploring it. I think we're very careful about just entering a new market, right? I think we see a lot of startups in this part of the world who treat Southeast Asia as a single market.
True.
And they go, and I think this also comes like from the VCs as well, right? They say, well, we don't want to fund a single market startup, right? So go prove that you can do 2 more markets and then come back to us. It's okay, I can understand that, but if you don't go in with the right partnerships, then you will find it very hard. So Philippines, for example, if you're going to go in, you probably want to have some connection to one of the big families that, operate most of, like in each of the verticals there. Indonesia operates in a very unique way. So we are building those partnerships, but our view of market entry in those markets is not us going in alone and doing it. It's finding partners on the ground that we can go in with. And with our business model, it's actually quite flexible to work with partners, not just go in with a single replacement product.
Yeah, that sounds like a sound way to approach things, and it's been a recurring theme in a lot of the interviews that I've done of Thailand-based founders, where they see the Southeast Asian opportunity, but they also understand or learn the hard way that expanding in Southeast Asia, you can't treat it like a monolith. There's so many different subcultures, and there's so much localization that you need to do as soon as you cross international borders, despite from a zoomed out lens, everything looking the same.
Yeah, I think for us, like the payment gateways that we use operate across the region. So there's some stuff that definitely translate very well, right? So we build the integrations here, but we can use them in pretty much any market. The product, like the point of sale product, the idea of digital ordering and payments, this is pretty well understood. But then your go-to-market is just very different, right? Like it's very unique to each market. The amount of restaurants that fall into our target market might be quite different. And we have different conversations with our investors. We have some investors who are or even people who we just pitch to who say like, just build in Thailand, right? Thailand is in F&B, 300,000 restaurants here.
That's a lot of restaurants.
They're like, yeah, if you go get 10% of it and like you can monetize at, X per month on that, like you're building a very, very sizable business. Just in this single market, right? And again, you do it at 10, 20, 25% market share. It's still a very big business. And then you find other like VCs who will say, no, you have to be across markets for it to make sense, right? So that's just to say, you'll get different pieces of advice from different people. I don't know if there's one right way to think about it, but I think as long as we're smart about our next market and how we do it, and we're aware of kind of like the potential pitfalls, I think we should be in okay space.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And speaking of investors and VCs, we got connected through our friends at A2D.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to touch upon is the fact that a lot of our audience here, they're either aspiring founders or early stage founders. So for them, just fundraising in general is something that seems like a hard nut to crack.
Yeah.
Since you've gone through that process, which I understand must have been a headache in its own, so can you just talk a little bit more about what the process was, any challenges you faced, and any learnings that you could translate to other people who might be listening to you?
Yeah, I think it's fundraising is it's not fun, but it is something that you can, if you do it in a structured way, you can get a lot out of it.
Right.
And what I mean by that is keep track. Like me and one of my co-founders, we keep track of every conversation we have, right? So we have our spreadsheet. Every single VC we've talked to, when was the last time we spoke to them? What were the notes? When are we following up? What was their response? If they've said no, why have they said no?
Right.
And that creates, that I think is very important. First, it gives you a little bit of control over the process. And I think I think part one is just making sure you're very structured in the way that you do it. When we did our last round, we spent a week in Singapore, we spent a week in Jakarta. When you go to these markets, people, one piece of advice is if you say, I'm coming to your market, they will find time to meet you.
Right.
If you say, let's set up a call, it'll be 3 weeks from now.
Right.
So, we did it, we said, hey, look, we're going to go to Singapore and we're going to do 5 meetings a day. We're going to meet 25 VCs. Right? And then we're going to go do the same in Jakarta, right? They're not as many, so we probably didn't do 25, but you get the idea.
Right.
And we were able to schedule all of that, right? Because again, you say, hey, I'm physically coming there.
Right.
So I would say one piece of advice is make the effort, go there. When you meet people in person, it's always a much better conversation than it is if you do it online. So I think that's one piece of advice is make the effort, go meet people in person. They'll also find time for you. I think VCs and investors in general are super helpful at connecting you with other people.
Right.
I don't know. I think that we've, if there was ever hey, do you know anyone at this firm? We were trying to get in touch. They've always been very good. And then I think the last two more things. One thing is take every conversation, speak to everybody. If someone says even if you think there's no way they're ever going to invest in this type of market where funding is not so easy to come by,
right.
Have all the conversations. I spoke to a guy I met somebody at a conference 2 years ago. And we kept in touch, and every few months he'd check back in. We'd give him an update or whatever. And 2 years later, a month ago, he invested. Right.
Oh wow!
So this was a long process, but that first conversation, we met briefly, and then he's like, "Oh, can you come have breakfast with me tomorrow?" And it was early in the morning somewhere, and I was like, "Fine." And so I think take every conversation. Don't assume something is not going to work out. And then the last thing, this is a founder journey in general. Just get used to rejection. 99% of your conversations are going to be no, probably, unless you're a superstar, or unless markets get better. But at a certain point, you find humor in it.
True.
Me and my co-founder, we got pretty good at, you start reading every situation better, and if you gotta know, you gotta know. I think that's the most important thing is you gotta let water run off your back.
Right.
You're gonna get a lot of no's. You're not gonna talk to 3 VCs and get 3 term sheets.
No, that word does not exist.
But it's okay. You only need one or two yeses anyway.
That is true. Yeah, that's something that one of our other guests also mentioned. That it's just you just need that one yes, right? So it's something that you have to keep pursuing, and just the advice you gave about just keeping track of conversations, and the example that you gave of something taking 2 years to snowball into an actual investment. So just the patience and keeping track of things. There's a lot of different lessons that somebody who's raising right now could learn from that journey as well. So thanks for sharing that.
And the only thing I'll add on that is like listen to the feedback you're getting. You know, the good VCs will tell you like this is what we're this is why we said no.
Right.
The good VCs. Yeah. And again, when you go back to your structure, your spreadsheet, wherever you track this, like write what they said. Because sometimes we had a VCs in our early rounds who said, "Hey, like right now you have 5 restaurants.
Right.
Well, when you have 150, this is interesting." So we remembered that. So then when we had 150, we went back. Hey, you said 150. You said this revenue number. Like that's why it's important to keep everything organized, but also listen carefully on what they're saying, because they will also respect the fact that you like listen to them, came back.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And in a lot of cases, they're speaking from a place of experience, right? So it's always great, especially if you're a young founder, first-time founder, to get feedback about the market, about your business model, things of that nature. I was smiling because it reminded me of an entrepreneur whose journey I was following, and I happened to be in the room a couple of times when they were participating in different pitch competitions or pitching events here in Bangkok, and every time they got a negative feedback during the Q&A, either from the judges or from the audience, they immediately started antagonizing that person. And I was sitting at the back of the room thinking, why are you doing this?
Yeah. You can't let it get to you in that way, especially. Because you're never going to argue someone into investing, you know?
Most definitely.
You're not going to convince someone who has a specific view on your business by arguing with them. True. They're not going to then turn around and say, "Oh, you know what? You're right. Let me give you my money."
My mistake. Here's the check.
The way that you prove them wrong is you go and build your business, and you say, "Oh, you know what?" Like, and you go prove them. Like, proof is in the pudding, right?
True.
You get nothing out of that other than you alienate someone forever, right? So or you alienate someone who's watching you, to get an idea of who you are, right? So you don't know who else is watching as well.
True.
Which is actually an even better point on that.
100%. So I don't think that person is listening, but in case you are, hey, this is my feedback. But you spoke about just the founder's journey a little while ago. So can you, maybe to the aspiring founder category of people who are listening, could you maybe give an insight as to the expectations versus reality side of things? Because especially the community that we hang out in, being a founder is glamorized.
I guess.
Which I'm cool with, because we need more founders, don't get me wrong, but there's a personal burden, a professional burden that comes with being an early stage founder that people don't talk about often enough. So without going into too much detail, if you could just maybe shed some light upon both the positives and negatives of the human side of being a founder and going on that journey.
I'll start with positives actually, because yes, there's a lot of the expectation is always more glamorized than the reality, but there are some things I went into this not realizing, or maybe not appreciating as much. One is you get to choose the people you work with, right?
True.
At least for the first, until you're very big, I guess. Right. You choose who your co-founders are. You choose who your first hires are. You choose who your sales team is going to be. You choose who your engineers are going to be. And you get to build a team as you want to build it, right? And if somebody you interview you don't like, you don't hire them, right? That is what a joy that is, right? Because there's no other job where you have that control, right? You don't get to control your bosses. You don't get control necessarily who's in your team, right? So I think that's something that I didn't realize or I didn't appreciate when I went in, but it's been amazing, right? I was just with our team today, and it's nice to see the team grow, and it's nice to see all these people that you enjoy working with. So I think that's something that was a very positive expectation versus reality. And I think it's cool to become like incredibly, like you become like incredibly smart at something very niche,
Right.
which like is kind of fun, right? You have this like very deep knowledge in something that like, you know, no one else necessarily maybe wants to have, but like,
For
it's
example,
cool.
the shrinking market size of
Yeah,
restaurants
F&B,
in Hong Kong.
exactly,
I had no
yeah.
idea about it.
Yeah. At least in this space, it still makes okay, like, what's it, small talk, I guess. People still like to talk about restaurants, but payment gateways maybe less so, and MDRs and things like that. But I don't know, it's cool. Maybe it's consulting. Like consulting, you do the same thing, right? You become like incredibly niche
Right.
understanding of something, but here you get to do it over like X number of years, which is quite fun.
True.
But then, yeah, of course, you have other stuff that, like, I think that the glamorized part mainly comes from the fact that, you know, you only hear about successes, right? There's the 90 whatever % failure rate is very real.
Right.
I think the way we see it is like you go to these founder events and stuff, and like you start, like some people you just don't see again after a while, right? Like maybe their startup didn't succeed or whatever. But then some, like you see them for like years, and you're like, oh, I'm so glad that like you're still going, right? Like this is the thing. So I think it's that. I think intertwined with that, it's like it just takes way longer than you think, right? Like you know this. I don't know who said it, but it's like, you know, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success, right? Like one day, if everything goes great and the business gets massive and like you sell or whatever, then people see the headline, like, right? And then they think like, oh, like you just like, you managed to just do that. But it's like, yeah, but you've been working at it. At that point, you realize that, like you just asked me before we started how long it's been. I was like, oh yeah, it's actually been 3 years since we incorporated, 4 years since we started, you know, discussing it. And every part of the process takes longer than you think. The sales cycles are longer than you think, especially at the beginning. After a while, you get to a groove that's better, but like product development takes longer than you think, right? Everything does, right? So I think just be ready for that, right? You're not going to be in a comfortable, I don't know, if like you're relying on it as like for income, like you're not necessarily going to be in a comfortable financial income space probably for a while. And you're gonna think about it all the time, right? There's no break from thinking about the business, right? Like we were just talking about, like in another job, you might finish a project, you might finish a deal, you might have like 3 days off between, right? Like when we're at BCG, you'd finish a project, maybe the weekend, like you might not be staffed for another few days after that. It doesn't really happen. But in a way, you don't even want it to happen because, like,
that is true.
It's like if you know, you're like, well, you want to think about how you can build this business as fast and as big as possible. So I think it's that, and then I think the last, like we talked about rejection, right? But it's like you have to get used to rejection across the board, right? Like your first 100 sales calls, maybe somebody will take a meeting with you, but like you're gonna get rejected a lot. Partnerships, you might want to do some partnerships. These guys are going to say you're too small, why would I partner with you, right? Like, so I think you just have to build like a very healthy level of resilience. I think resilience is like incredibly important. Keeping your humor through it, I think, is important. And then just being like a resilient problem solver is how I describe it. That's what you need to be. You have to just be a resilient problem solver.
Resilient problem solver. That's going to be a thumbnail.
Big or small. Every day you're going to have 100 problems to deal with, and some of them will be very small, some will be very big. But what's good is you can solve them, right? If somebody says, "Hey, can we give a 10% discount to this merchant?" You can just decide in that moment. Yes, you don't have to make a slide deck. You don't have to go to a committee. You don't have to. You want to change the price. If we want to change the price tomorrow, we just change the price tomorrow, right? So that's kind of you can move so quickly, but it also means that you're constantly just like solving that.
Yeah, that was a very, very positive answer, and I appreciate that. And the fact that some of the challenges also you look at from a positive lens, and I think as a founder, it helps you stay motivated and retain your sanity amongst everything that's happening. But
you have to want to do it,
right?
And you cannot. I don't know where I saw this. I saw this the other day. Someone was like, if your goal is to like become rich, this is like definitely not the best way to do it, right? because if you look at the probabilities and like, you hear about the outcomes. Yesterday we saw a restaurant booking software, 7 rooms, sold for $1.2 billion, right?
Oh, wow.
So you suddenly like, oh my God, like restaurant tech selling for so much. But like, these are the outcomes you hear, but like that's, like again, we talk about it, 95, 96, 97% is the failure rate. So you have to like really want to do it, and your motivation should be more than just, I want to try and build it and sell it and make a buck off it, right?
100%.
Because you might be better off staying in a job that pays you a stable salary for 20 years instead.
True. Yeah, that's right. You got to do it for the right reasons, right? So
Yeah. And I think for us it was like you just want to get your hands dirty, right, on something, like build something, feel that you like made something and you were able to, like, I remember the first time we made revenue. It was like so exciting. We're like, dude, we like built something and someone paid for it. Like how, like that's awesome. And that's like not something we really got to feel when we were in consulting or banking before that necessarily.
100%. I still have a hard copy of the first invoice.
Yeah, I still have ours. I still have the first tickets that printed out of the printers, because we were like building those printer integrations for a while. It was like the first tickets that came out. So I still have that somewhere at home.
But these small wins matter a lot in these long journeys, right? So it's important to reflect on them. Now, speaking of reflection, let's turn our face forwards and see what's next.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you've been in business for 3+ years now, been ideating for even longer. So, and kudos on how far you've reached, and just as a consumer, I've used your product and I've interacted with your product, and that's something that I think the tangibility of having interacted with somebody's product, it kind of it's interesting. But as a consumer and as an entrepreneur, I'm curious to know what's next in your journey from a product, market, anything that you would like to share with us.
Yeah. I think we talk about the markets a little bit. I think we're still deciding on that. So that's still kind of like under review. But I think the most exciting thing product-wise for us this year is we are building our open APIs right now. So our goal is we want to be a platform that an ecosystem that kind of has 3 parts to it, right? So we want to have in the middle of our business our merchants, our restaurants, right? That sits at the core of our business. We want to have a stable of customers that are using our product, right? Like yourself, that have created accounts with us, who are part of our rewards program, who can become part of our ads ecosystem. So our customers and our restaurants can work together. And then the other side, we want to build an ecosystem of partners, right? So in order for us to do that, we need to have a way that they can connect in with us. And so we're building our open APIs now, and this will then allow things like a reservations platform, accounting software, at some point insurance products, financing products. So it allows our restaurants to have access to all these other solutions that they may have today in very siloed ways. Right? But a supplier ordering solution as well, right? So like being a little bit of that one-stop shop for them, but then also giving them the best benefits of being part of this ecosystem, right? If I'm a single restaurant and I try to go get a deal with one of these solutions, probably don't get a very good deal. Part of our ecosystem, working together. I think that's something we're really excited about. How do we give our restaurants access to customers on one side, partners on the other side, and get the most out of using Papaya? And so the key part of that is this open API structure that we're building, and it's something that we're super excited about this year.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And like you said, partners, especially in the flexibility that you provide, are a big part of your ecosystem, if I might use that word. And just that API, those APIs would help sort of consolidate that ecosystem into something that's more seamless, especially from a consumer standpoint, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's like super important, because like there are a lot of companies out there that are very good in the thing that they do, right?
True.
And working with them is easier than trying to just build everything and compete, because like, so I think giving our merchants the best access to the best of everything is what we want to do. And then let them focus on, making great food and making great drinks and providing great service.
Sounds like a win-win for
and then the customers as well.
True, exactly. So it's good to know, and we'll obviously stay tuned for any announcements that you have. What's the best channel to follow? LinkedIn, I believe, or
Instagram, LinkedIn. We are admittedly not very good on our social media channels, but we are about to get much better. We just had a social media manager start with us yesterday.
Oh wow, okay.
So she is now you'll see a lot more of us around. I think as someone who's in his mid-30s, I'm not as well versed in the social media marketing world, so we finally have someone who's
thanks for making me feel old, but
well, that you've learned it. I've stayed away from it, I suppose.
Fair.
This is your bread and butter. For me, it's not quite there. So we're going to get better, but I think Instagram, hopefully on TikTok, we also want to kind of build channels that like not just about our product, but also like just kind of be a place where people can learn about new openings and places to eat, whether they use Papaya or not. Just kind of have something for the customers to also like learn about where to go in Bangkok.
Sounds fun. I look forward to it. In fact, I was just speaking with a friend who stumbled onto a page that you do about restaurants or food or something along those lines on Instagram, I believe.
Oh yeah, so, I might have. We might have. Yeah.
So I look forward to seeing more of that. And any final word for our audience for tonight?
It's an incredible journey to go on, I think, and as long as you go into this journey with, as I say, this idea of resilience and like an open mind and you're curious. I think if you stay curious throughout, it's a lot of fun, and who knows where it all ends up. But at least you come out. I think for everyone, you come out a much a different person in a good way.
Nice.
Whether you get your massive exit or not, and so I think that's something to always keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a great message, and I appreciate you taking the time today. And it was a pleasure, obviously through the interactions we've had at events or hearing you speak, reading about your business. I already knew a bit about your business, but it's good to know the person behind the business, and I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate the positive mindset that you bring to entrepreneurship, and it was a fun chat.
Great. Thank you so much as well for having me.
It was a pleasure, and we should do this again sometime.
Yeah, we should, definitely.
Thank you, Kush. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will see you in the next episode, and thanks to our friends at A2D for the connection.